Well, if you would, turn to John chapter 11. John chapter 11. The goal and purpose, as you're turning there, of the Lord saving us and bringing us to Himself is to make us like His Son. Romans 8:28 says that. I'm going to read a couple verses. You don't have to turn there, but just hold your finger. Get to John 11 if you want to turn, you can. Romans 8:29 says, "For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, in order that He might be the firstborn among many brothers." 2 Corinthians 3:18 tells us how God has designed it that His people would be transformed. And we all, 2 Corinthians 3:18, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed in the same image from one degree to another. All of us are in some stage or some degree in which we need to be transformed to another degree. And the way that God has designed that is by beholding the Lord in the person of Jesus Christ. Ephesians 5:1 tells us that we are to be imitators of God. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. Well, how can you imitate God and bear His image if you're not looking at His image? And where do we look at His image? Where has He revealed His image? In the person of Jesus Christ. So we're today in John 11, the title of my sermon, Beholding Christ to be Transformed. See, that's a terrible title. It probably is. I am terrible at making titles for sermons. Okay, every Monday morning, Casey says, "What's your title?" I have no idea. I don't know. Listen to it and tell me what it is. I'm not good at that. But this is what God wants us to do. Look at, think on, meditate, putting our eyes upon Christ, that we might be saved. John wrote this entire book. You could put at the front of the book of John, the Gospel according to John, subtitle, Beholding God. If you look, he said in John 1:14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen His glory. We're beholding His glory in this book. At the end of the book, in John 20, some of this is just a reminder. "But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may live, or may have life in His name." The whole purpose of the book of John is that you and I would behold the glory of God, be transformed, and our faith would increase, and we would experience real life in Jesus. If you wanted to sum that up. We have a tall task today. You can pray for me. Some of you will say, "Well, you missed this, and you could have said this here, and you might have pointed this out here." That's probably very true. You can share those things with me afterwards. I'd love to talk about those things. But in chapter 11, we're going to cover the entire chapter this morning, okay? Verse by verse, so we're going to be here for 16 hours. I'm just kidding. We're going to breeze through this thing, stopping at certain points to behold Christ. So we're going to look at the glories of Christ, how God has displayed Himself in the person of Christ in this chapter, okay? So let me just set kind of the scene. We've just gotten done with Jesus in John chapter 10, and once again He's declared a truth about Him and to encourage the faith of the saints, and it's angered the Pharisees and they want to kill him. That's kind of repetitive throughout the book of John, isn't it? Jesus gives long exposition of who he is, his will, how God saves people, all this stuff. Believers, there's believers in that come out of that, and then there's people that all they want to do is kill him. Two groups of people, okay? That's kind of the way it is in the world. You got people that believe and love Jesus, and the rest of them are enemies and they want to kill him. There's no middle ground. Now, it may be covered up, but they don't, I don't want to kill Jesus. They might put Jesus on Facebook and things, and I love Jesus, but hate his church because they don't ever go or anything like that. So, it might be covered up a little bit. So, the scenario is he's gone across the Jordan to the place where John was baptizing, and there he is. And then it says that there's a certain man that was ill, in verse 1 of 11, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary, of her sister Martha. It is Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So we have Mary and Martha. Their brother Lazarus is ill at this point. Okay, he's sick. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it said, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified. Jesus wasn't too concerned about this illness. He knew what he was going to do. We know, because we've been around the Bible, we've heard things in church, we've been in church. Lazarus is the man that Jesus raises from the dead. So you might say to yourself, no big deal. Of course his illness does not lead to death. But who did not know John chapter 11? Everybody in John chapter 11 didn't know how John chapter 11 ended. Okay? So to them, this was serious. They don't know what's going to happen. And Jesus tells the person that comes, this illness, this affliction, this suffering, this trial, this hardship, if you wanted to call it this, is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Is that how we tend to think of suffering, hardship, trials, illness, chronic illness, cancer, whatever, death? Do we think of it as in order to glorify God? Jesus does. The mind of Christ is like this. How are our minds being transformed to think the same way? And then look what it says. This is fascinating to me. Absolutely, you could preach an entire sermon series on what is being taught here. Now Jesus, I want you to listen carefully. If your Bible does not have a certain word in here, get a new Bible after church. Okay? So Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. So, or therefore, any transition word that makes you realize his love and his delay are connected together. I love him, so I don't go. Okay, how many of us think about that? How many of us, that's not how we operate, is it? If we know someone in our family, someone whom we love, is hurting, is in need, what's our first response? Going, and probably rightfully so. Okay? But look at this. He says, I love them, so therefore I am waiting. Why am I waiting? Why is he waiting? He already told us. Because this illness is for the glory of God. Christ's love is revealed in a delay. think about that. Think about the fact how many of you are waiting for Jesus to show up for something in your life. And you only think of it as, He doesn't love me because He hasn't done it yet. And He's saying, I love you, therefore I'm waiting. Therefore I'm in delay. Because I know what you need the most of, and it's for you to see my glory. And I'm going to tell you, there's no better way to see the glory of God than through suffering, affliction, hardship, and trials. And all of us are in a trial, or coming out of one and going into one, in some form or fashion. This just flies in the face of a prosperity gospel that deceives people into thinking you come to Jesus, everything's going to be great. How many of you came to Jesus and realized that's not true? It doesn't happen. Everything doesn't just get hunky-dory. It's not all fun and stuff. It's not all just simple and easy and breeze by and health and wealth and the whole 9 yards. It's just not. Christ loved Martha and Lazarus, so He stayed 2 days longer. Could He have Could He have spoke at that moment, not even being there, and Lazarus be healed? Could He do that? Has He done it before? Yes, He's done it before. Who did He do that with? The centurion. He came, hey, you don't have to go, just say a word. And He said a word and he was healed. So we know that Jesus could have healed him, and we know that Jesus walked around always doing good to people and healing people. So what in the world is He doing? What He knows is best. One of the things that you and I must do in waiting for the Lord to show up to deliver us from whatever it is that we're struggling with or going through is to wait patiently and to trust His wisdom that He knows better than you and His timing is better than your timing, and to not complain in your waiting. If you're waiting but complaining, I'm telling you, you're not waiting biblically. If you're complaining and saying I'm enduring, you're not really biblically enduring. Because you're complaining. This is too hard. Why doesn't God show up? He must hate me. Come on, get with the program. I'm waiting here. What's the deal? You're on my times table, basically. And I mean, I'm not trying to be too harsh here, but the reality is what we're saying is, God, I'm smarter than you, and I know what I need, and when I need it better than you do. And He's saying, no, I know what you need, and I know when you need it, and I know the allotted amount of time that I need to pull back and wait in order for you to see something of me that you would not see if you did not go through this. Okay? You say, why in this church do you constantly badger us about this whole suffering? Maybe that's a thought. I don't know. Can I just tell you something? Because you are either suffering now in some degree, or you will in some degree at some time. And God in His wisdom has put it in His scriptures to prepare us for it. It may be very, very harsh and extreme, like in other places in the world. It may not. It may be very minimal, but isn't it funny that it's not suffering when someone else is going through it, but it's suffering when you're going through the same thing. It's not really suffering until it's on you. Everyone else looks like a wimp when they're going through something, but then when it's you, now they're not a wimp anymore. You're not a wimp anymore, right? Christ displayed His love for His people in delaying so that Lazarus would die. Okay? Let's read on. Then after this He said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. Now He wants to go back. He wants to go back to where He left, back to the people who were wanting to stone Him and kill Him, back there. The disciples said to Him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you want to go there again? Jesus answered, this is kind of a weird way to answer him. Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble. But if he sees the light of the world, if anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not with him. What's he telling them? Well, it's not time for me. In other words, this is what he's saying. It's not time for the darkness yet. It's not time for my death. I'm still walking in light. I'm not going to stumble now. There's no stumbling, y'all. There's no stumbling in the hands of the Jews. There's no being in darkness. There's no being put to death yet, because it's not my time yet. God has appointed a time for every person to die, and God has appointed a time for Jesus, and a time when He will be handed over. He will give Himself over to the Jews and the Pharisees and be put to death on a cross. There was a time. That time's not yet. I'm going back over there. I'm not afraid of these people that want to stone me to death, because I know that they can't stone me until that time has come. Behold the faith and fearlessness of our Savior, Jesus Christ. His trust and dependence and faith in the promises and the proclamation and the decrees of God His Father, that you will not be put to death one moment until your work is done. And he trusted it, and he walked in it. And he was fearless and courageous and bold, not afraid of the stones they wanted to throw at him. Why? Because he knew not one of them was going to be dead, bring his death blow, until God was determined that time came. And he knew that it wasn't time yet, because he knew the time in which he would give himself over. We have before us Christ trusting in his Father's sovereign will as a man for Christ's life and His death. If you could say it like this: Jesus Christ is the perfect believer. Okay, He lived a perfect, faithful, faith-filled, believing on the promises and will of God perfectly. He trusted perfectly in the sovereign will of God for his life. Do any of you ever fear death? Are you afraid to die? Honestly. Yeah, I think all of us, if we were honest, might say there's a little bit of fear. Maybe it's because you don't want to leave your family. Maybe you're not prepared yet to, maybe you want to see this happen or whatever. There's constant things that can bombard us with fear. Or we're always thinking, how in the world is this all going to play out? I have all these circumstances in this situation. They're hard, they're pressing, they're going to overwhelm me, they're going to destroy me. This is going to be horrible. And yet, what we see about Christ is, I know they want to stone me. I know they want me to die. I will not die until the moment that's already been predetermined for me to die. Should that not set us free to live boldly for the cause of Christ? That's what causes missionaries to go overseas to places where they will get their heads chopped off. People that believe, I'm not getting my head chopped off until the day that God has predetermined for my head to get chopped off. Okay? But most of us don't live in that realm of boldness and being courageous and fear. Breathe for a second. Christ did for you. Okay? I want you to hear me. I know you struggle believing. I know you struggle with the fear of man. Christ didn't for you. Your righteousness. So he says, verse 11, after saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. And the disciples, just think about this. We're going over there where they want to stone us for a guy that's asleep. Because the disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. I don't know. Do you guys laugh when you hear these things? Because I'm thinking to myself, okay, Lord, they want to kill you. He's asleep. The dude's going to wake up. Like, what are we doing going over there? Right? But listen to Jesus. He goes, he just explains this thing. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking a rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, let me just tell you plainly how this is. Lazarus has died. I want you to hear the language. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. And I love Thomas. Thomas called the twins, said this fellow, I don't know if he's serious, like this is just an act, or Thomas is like, let's just go die with him then. Fine, come on, let's go. We can't really, you could read into it. I only read that in there because at the end of John, when Thomas is doubting, right? He goes, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. But he tells them plainly, Lazarus has died, and I'm glad that I was not there to heal him. I'm glad Lazarus died. Because, listen to this. God allowed Lazarus to die, and it had nothing to do with Lazarus. It was for what? So that you may believe. It's for everyone else around that he let him die. It's for us reading that our faith would be encouraged. Now remember, they don't know that this whole resurrection thing is going to happen. They just know he's dead. And Jesus is out here talking about he's glad that it happened, and it's for the glory of God, and we don't have a clue what's going on, and we're going over here to get stoned. Now, verse 17, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And listen to what Jesus says. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. I know that the resurrection is coming later. But I am the resurrection, the source, the foundation, the hope that we have in the resurrection. I'm here now. He's going to rise today to manifest that I am the resurrection and life and to glorify God. And he said, this is what you need more than me just healing him when he's sick. This is why I delayed. This is why I loved you, so I waited, because I want to glorify myself, and you seeing my glory in raising Lazarus from the dead is better this way than the way that you wanted it. Isn't that our whole life? We want it this way, and Jesus says, I want it this way, and I know better than you. I mean, if we just want to be simple about it. Why? Why does he know better than us? He's infinitely all knowledgeable and all wise. And guess what? We're not. You are not. I am not. He knows what's best. And he's saying, this is my love showing you my glory. And I see that the only way you will see that is in this hard and difficult time. For Lazarus, well, it didn't seem to matter. He was dead. His soul, probably with the Lord. He didn't care. But who was affected around Lazarus? His family. So they're grieving, they're mourning, they're hurting, and Jesus says, I'm delaying. Jesus Christ the resurrection, and the life. The one, He's the one that makes dead people come to life. Let's just pause there for a minute. I had this thought, but I got a little weirded out because I didn't know what would happen if I did it. I wanted to kind of know what a dead body looked at like for 4 days. And I looked at Casey and said, I think I should look that up on the internet. And I thought, I'm just going to pull back on that one a little bit. Because you just never know what's going to come up, right? But I'm like, because this is a story. He's dead for 4 days. I mean, if Lazarus was dead for 4 days, typically a body would look like this. They're after 4 days of death. What is this? And everyone's like, I can see Olivia, she's like, this is nasty. But this is really what, this is dead. Okay, we're talking about dead. Physically dead and put in a tomb. And Jesus says, I am the restorer of life to the dead. I restore it. Me. Only me. No one else. There's nobody on the planet, no one in the universe that has the power to restore life and keep life restored and healthy and built up for all of eternity. He's not, you need to understand something. Glorification is not this zap and you have this thing for all of eternity. God will sustain us for all of eternity. People that have been dead for thousands of years are one day going to hear the voice of Jesus Christ and come up out of the grave and meet their soul and be restored with a brand new body. That's incredible. We can't even put it together. I've seen very few dead bodies in my life. Really, in Washington, people do not have caskets and open. That was all a new, weird thing to me when I moved down here. It's so weird that you go to the viewing people, come see her, she's in the casket. I'm like, I don't want her, I'm good, I'm over here, hanging out, And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, think about being in whatever one of these places are. You're in there, so-and-so is laying dead with the casket open. And Jesus has the power to say, rise. And up out of the casket comes the person. This is what's going to happen. This is what he's doing. And this is his love to his people. Just declare and show his power. He says, I am the resurrection and life, verse 25. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? The question is to you, do you believe this? Do you believe? We should even change our language. Oh, that Christian died. No, he didn't. It says right here, though he die, he live. It's like walking through that. It's like your hands on the door all your life, and death is just you pulling the door open and going. You're entering in. Never does your fellowship break with Jesus. Always unbroken fellowship from the moment of conversion for all of eternity. Now, all the way into death. Jesus is preparing us to die. With his statement, what a wise shepherd. Behold, your great shepherd. What a great shepherd to say, listen, you're going to die physically. There's this death that you think's death, but if you're mine, you're going to keep living. That's a good thing for a shepherd to do. Prepare you to die and leave this thing and move on in eternity. Listen, we're predominantly young in this church, and so rarely do we think we're going to die or think about death. Think about ceasing to exist as you know it now in this physical body, and yet your soul continue on with Jesus Christ. He's preparing us. Think about it. He's telling this to all of the people there, right? I'm the resurrection and life. Whoever believes in me, you won't die, you'll just keep living. Do you think anybody there was really thinking about dying? Maybe because they're around death right now. People die. I'll never forget going over to Sister Linda Stanley's after Brother Johnny died and having to carry Brother Johnny's body from his upstairs down the stairs to help the person, and he's not there. Is this a shell here? Him, the person, gone. It's real. I just found out my mom sent me a box of my old lineman stuff, and I'd made these good friends there, but I forgot their last name, and I'm like, oh sweet, Facebook, now you can just type it in, you can find them, right? So I'm flipping through there, and I find the guy and his brother. I type in the first one, I can't find him. I'm like, everyone's got Facebook. What's his problem? Where's his Facebook at, right? No, I can't. So I'm looking at his brother's Facebook, and I find out through all of this roundabout way that he died in 2011, 4 years after we left lineman school. He was a lineman who built power lines, who worked with 7,000, 14,000 volts upward. Do you know how he died? Working on a tiny electrical box at his own house. And I thought, he's gone. Not even 26, gone. And when I left him, I didn't know Jesus and he didn't know Jesus. It's real. But we can have hope because of our union with Christ. As He died and He rose, we die and we rise with Him. And so she said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who's come into the world." Now I want you to behold Jesus as our sympathetic high priest. This is probably the point where we should just stay there. Listen what he does. When she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go up, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. Behold, your high priest who is sympathetic to the deepest emotions of the human soul. He takes them on as his own. He looks and he sees the grief and he sees the heartache and he sees the moaning and he sees the weeping, and he is deeply grieved and troubled in his soul. He's moved deeply and he weeps with those who are weeping. Brethren, do not ever think that there is no one that understands your situation. You can be in the deepest and the darkest state of emotions, and there is one who understands perfectly and who is perfectly sympathetic. Listen to Hebrews 4. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Why do we get to pass through the heavens? Because of our union with Christ. If Jesus is going somewhere, we're going with him. Let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted and yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. He can sympathize with you. Let that be confidence to you that you can go to him. Wherever you're at. My wife doesn't understand me. Okay. My friends don't understand me. Okay. No one is wrong. Lie. Bring the wandering person back from that lie when you hear it. You hear the lie, you bring him back. He's going off. Bring him back, like it said in James, with truth. No, you don't have no one who understands. You have the one who understands perfectly. Okay. Christ as our sympathetic high priest. Now, moving on. So the Jews, listen to what the Jews said. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" Jesus displayed his love with his tears. How many of us can honestly say that we have truly wept with those who weep? What a great demonstration of your love for people. When you can in some way identify emotionally with them. God has given us emotions. They're real. They're gifts from Him. We ought not to downplay them at all. We ought to control them when we need them, as we ought to. But if the whole idea is let's be like Christ. I mean, you guys can get all like, oh gosh, you know. Have any of us ever just prayed that we'd have more tears? Tears. You know what God does with them? He bottles them up in the book of Psalms. I know this sounds emotional and whatever, that's fine. But I just wonder, if Christ was deeply moved in His spirit and was led to tears for the people that He loved, what does it say of us if there's no emotion, if we're stoic all the time? It says something about our heart, I think. Then Jesus, again deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said, remember this is the same one that said, "I know he's going to rise." She didn't catch everything when he said, "I'm the resurrection and life now, today, this day." She says, "By the time there be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" See, over and over again, this is what the whole thing's about. Seeing the glory of God. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifts up His eyes and says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." When in the world did He pray? Have we heard Him pray since this whole thing? You know what I think after yesterday as I was thinking about this and reading this? Remember what it says in Romans 8? About the groanings of the Spirit? And how those are prayers to God and the Spirit interprets them to the Father. We can't really communicate them with words in our soul, and they're communicated by the Spirit to the Father. Could it not be that when it says Jesus was deeply moved and greatly troubled in His spirit, that the groaning that was inside, or as I heard this Greek word, deeply moved, means this, like it was like a horse that snorts. This just in Him was not some sort of prayer. It could be. I'm not saying that's, I'm not being dogmatic here. I'm just thinking with it. Can we just think openly here? That's cool. Okay. So, or He just utters a prayer silently in His mind. I don't know, but there's something that God, His Father, has heard. "I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." That they may believe in our oneness. Okay, our unity together. 43, when He said these things, He cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out. We read over that sometimes. We can't. It happened. A dead person really was dead for 4 days. Jesus said, Lazarus, rise up. That same Lazarus who was dead came up out of the grave. This is what's... And he's got all the stuff on him. Right? So, think about this. If we understand what happens to the soul and the body's here, the soul goes to be with the Lord or wherever that person's soul, but here we're talking about to the Lord. Jesus has the power with a word to unite a soul that's in heaven to a body that's dead here on earth and bring it back to life with a word. What's he showing us? What's the glory here? I think this is what it is. One, that Christ has the power and authority over physical life and spiritual life. What do I mean by spiritual life? This is an illustration, not a perfect doctrinal truth. It's not doctrinally talking about regeneration, but this is an illustration of what happened to every single one of us before we were converted. He called us and we were raised from the dead, spiritually speaking. That's how every one of us got saved. But I also believe this. The glory here is this. The same word that came out of Christ's mouth to raise Lazarus from the dead, that word is what we have preserved, the Word of God. It holds the same power to bring life today. There's no one too far gone to not hear the Word and come to life. No sinner too far off that God cannot raise, spiritually speaking, from the dead with the power of His Word today. It's that mystery of this physical Word and the Spirit coming alongside the Word, using the Word, taking the Word and penetrating deep within people's soul. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you hear the Word and you just go, you just feel it. It's on you. It's like it walked up you from one side and down the other. The power of God's Word, the power of Christ. What about you? Someone speaks a word and raises the dead and claims to be God. We might ought to go with, He's God. We might ought to do that. Now, final two. This is pointing to Him being the ultimate resurrection, the firstborn from the dead. You say, now hold on. He raised 2 people from the dead while He was here. Guess what? They died again later, and He has not raised them from the dead yet. Okay? But there was one man who died, literally died, and 3 days later came up and is still alive today. And that's Jesus Christ. And all of the gospel, all of the blessings of the gospel, all of the forgiveness of sin, all of your sanctification, all of your adoption, all of the blessings are guaranteed because Jesus Christ got up from the grave and declared, I am who I've said I am, and all my promises are going to be kept. I'm alive. And He goes to heaven for us, before us. And because we're united with Him, we're there. Think about that. Guys, there's a mysterious thing going on where you're actually in heaven with God, with Jesus, because you're united to Him, yet you're here. This is incredible stuff. And then finally, I see this, I saw this morning, I thought about this morning. Christ displays the glory that He is as the persecuted one for righteousness' sake. So let's just review real quickly what happens. A man dies. Jesus declares His power and authority over life and death, that He is God. And then all they want to do is kill Him. 2 responses. Some believed, worshipped, loved, followed Him. A whole other group loved what they had in this world so much that they weren't willing to give it up, and would rather see the glory of God die than give up their life. He's the persecuted one. He went into persecution. His whole life he was being persecuted. He understands what it is to be talked about, to be lied about, to be pursued, to be jailed and put to death. Do you see that? He can go to the church, folks in the Middle East, and say, I can understand what you're going through. I know the suffering. He can go to the people in America who are really just verbally persecuted and say, I know what it is to be lied about and hated for the light that's in you. I know this. I'm your high priest. I can understand. I can walk with you in it. I can show you how I did this. So many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees, told them what Jesus had done. So this is what happened. So they hear that he's raised him from the dead. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? I don't know. Believe him? That would be the question. What do we do? Believe him. That should be the answer. For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. They loved themselves and what they had more than the glory of God, and they would rather see it put to death than give it all up. If he keeps doing all this stuff, people are going to follow him, and we're out. All our money is gone, our jobs, occupation, we're going to throw it. You know what that tells me? They knew. They knew who he was. What a picture of the depravity of man, that man would rather hold on to all of what is his rather than give it up and submit and love and treasure Jesus Christ. Be careful. We can do the same thing. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said, you know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. He has no idea what he's saying. He's like, this is going to be perfect. One guy can die, but he doesn't realize that what he's just done. God has used that prophecy that was meant in a negative way, and it spoke great truth. It is better that Jesus die so that nations don't perish. He didn't have any idea what he was saying. I'm glad he said it. He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who were scattered abroad from that day, and they made the plans to put him to death. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed. Real just quick little truth. There's times to flee persecution and there's times to go head first in it. Jesus taught us that. Right here he's saying, you know what? Okay, I've done this. It's what I wanted. This is what the Lord wanted me to do. I'm going to the wilderness. There's a time to flee. There's a time to go in. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think? That he will come to the feast at all? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so they might arrest him. Jesus displayed the glory of God, and man wanted to put it to death, and others bowed down and worshipped him. Now, we have seen things about our Savior that ought to make us humble. You can't look at Christ and go away and go, it's pretty interesting. We look at Christ and go, I need him. Because I don't trust God like I see him trusting here. I'm not fearless like I see this. I don't have the emotions that can connect with other people on an emotional level like he did. I don't have that. I need that. I don't have the power power to raise the dead, but there's many dead around me. I need Him. All of this demands our humility and our dependency and our desperation for Him. I know I'm going long, but I studied it, so I'm not going to waste it. Is that okay? We can trust Him that He loves us when things are hard and He's not coming. Where are you at? Guys, David just read? I just read it. I was sitting there this morning. He says, "Why are you so far away?" Doesn't he feel that way sometimes? Lord, you're so far away. Where are you at? You don't love. Wrong. In His delay, He's loving you because He knows what's best. Hold up your head, old droopy head. You know the Hebrews, when He's hold up your arms, old droopy arms. We need to hold up our countenance and hope, even in the delay, because we can, because we're loved. It's better to be loved by Him and Him delay than to not be loved by Him and us get everything when we want it. He's not limited, folks. You cannot walk away and see a man, the God-man, with words, cause the dead to live and go away and go, how is He going to help me? How's He going to help this church? How's He going to save people? How's He going to save my family? How's He going to save my son, my daughter, mothers? He is able. There's going to be moments where your kids and you're going, they're going to hell. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is the most disobedient, rambunctious. I don't even know what's happening with this kid. God's not limited. I cannot stand it when we got to get our kids saved by the time they're like, what is it now, like 10? Because heck, if they get past 10, it's hopeless. Has anybody ever read the Bible that says that stuff? The same power to save a 10-year-old is the same power that is needed to save a 70-year-old. No different. That just breeds more doubt. Those kind of silly things. You can trust Him. I want us to just pray now. Spend some time with the Lord thinking about those things and just prepare your heart for a few minutes before we take the Lord's Supper. Okay? And I'll ask Kyle, you want to help me with that when we're done?